And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, could I still be considered an environmentalist even when I insist on using quadruple-ply toilet paper? And with Paul Gosar censured by Congress, will employers remember to reject and ban violence in the workplace and also puberty? And now, the podcast host who would never venture out into the woods without his blankie and num-nums, Pete Dominic.
He's not wrong. I did carry a little yellow blankie around for quite a long time. Well, look who showed up to listen to today's episode of Stand Up. Thank you very much for joining me. I gotta say, you picked the right day to press play because I outdid myself today. I definitely outdid myself today. My conversation with Rick Ridgeway, which begins at 37 minutes, is, I gotta say, one of the best things I've done here on the podcast. Because Rick is a 72-year-old adventurer and mountaineer who has traveled the world and seen the world, and he shares his experiences losing a friend in an avalanche, as well as another one in a kayaking trip, and he knows everybody, and everybody knows him in the world that he is in, and more. And I can't wait for you to hear it. And then I reached out to Ryan in Kansas, who is a very conservative guy, a farmer, a husband, a father of four, as a result of an critical email I got from a longtime listener named Andrew saying I needed to have more diverse points of view on the show. And so I'll read a little bit of that in a moment, but I appreciate always advice and criticism. And I was kind of already feeling like I have been talking to too many people who I already kind of agree with about things. These conversations aren't really about what I agree with generally here. I try to find smart people and ask them questions. It just so happens I probably agree with them because I think they're right, which is why I book them for the show. But the point is, contrarian points of view and disagreements and debates and arguments, they're good for the brain. They're good to expand your thinking on things. It makes you a better person, for sure. I just don't want to platform conspiracy theories and awful ideas on the show. So it's a delicate balance. I also don't want someone to say something ridiculous and then I can't counter it because I don't know what they're talking about. If you don't know what I mean, go listen to Sanjay Gupta with Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan sounds like the smart one there, but only because Sanjay Gupta wasn't prepared. He didn't know what he was referring to in several situations. And you just never want that dynamic either. It's a delicate balance that you have to strike if you don't want to be airing propaganda bullshit. But I really appreciate this guy Andrew's email, the tenor of it, and I even published it for subscribers in the subscriber daily email that you can read there. But I'll read a little bit of it. But that's why I reached back out to Ryan in Kansas, and I'll reach out to more folks as well. And Andrew writes in this email, he says, I've listened to your show for over 12 years. I agree with almost everything you say and feel, but I feel you're falling prey to what is technically referred to as confirmation bias. Barry Ritholtz talks a lot about it on your show. Later, he wrote, I feel that you're drifting to this bias, and it's worrying for such a long-time fan. And then he gave a bunch of ideas for guests and suggested I go on different podcasts, and finally said, I do love the show. The direction at the moment seems to not be considering the Venn diagram we have of people. So I have greatly appreciated all of that, Andrew. I published it for people to see. I think that the criticisms makes me better, makes the show better, smarter, more dynamic, and more interesting, and helps us all think differently and hear from different points of view. So I really appreciate that. You can always email me with any of that kind of thoughtful, constructive criticism. It's super helpful. I always welcome it. standupwithpete@gmail.com. Okay, so two great guests I think you're really going to love, and I've got the news for you as well. I almost didn't want to do the news. I'm so excited for you to hear Rick Ridgeway, especially, that I almost wanted to just start the podcast with it. Press play, you go right into it. And maybe I should have saved it for Friday because I usually don't do the news. But I'm doing it. I'm doing the news. If you want to skip ahead to that, go ahead. Otherwise, it's time for The Last 24. And today's show is brought to you by Indeed.com. Indeed is a hiring partner that gets you what you really want. A short list of quality candidates as fast as possible. Indeed.com/stand-up. Tell you more about it later, but now time to get to the news. All right, a couple random things here up top. First of all, the QAnon shaman, guy named Jacob Chansley. Remember this guy? He's from Arizona as well. They got a lot of crazy people there. He wore the horned cap and carried a spear into the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Well, he's going to spend years behind bars for obstruction. Yeah, a federal judge sentenced him 41 months in prison on Wednesday, handing down one of the longest sentences in connection with the January 6th assault on the U.S. Capitol. Prior to his sentencing, he spoke at length about his time in solitary confinement, his respect for Jesus and Gandhi. He was not, he said, a violent criminal or insurrectionist. He said, I'm a good man who broke the law. Well, the judge said that he was moved by a statement of contrition, but he was unable to justify a downward departure from the sentencing guidelines for the obstruction charge Chansley pleaded guilt to. And so here is his lawyer, Albert Watkins, his attorney, falling on his sword for him.
Mr. Chansley owned his responsibility. He sought to be accountable. He was and has been held accountable. And he is respectful of this court and everyone involved in this case for having put himself in this position. He is absolutely embracing being held accountable.
All right, well, I hope he embraces it for as long as 43 months. I mean, I'm not big on incarceration and prison time. I think it's all pretty much bullshit and doesn't necessarily change behavior. And we could talk about consequences and accountability, but locking someone in a cage seems pretty inhumane to me, including what they did to that guy in terms of solitary confinement. So maybe you think differently, and I'm happy to hear from you on that. Another big story yesterday probably went undercovered as far as I'm concerned because of the impact of it, but the Washington Post headline, the government dramatically underestimated job growth this summer. Initial reports underestimated job growth by a cumulative 626,000 jobs over 4 months. Mika Brzezinski mentioned it in her broadcast yesterday on MSNBC's Morning Joseph.
In a massive correction, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says it underestimated job growth for most of this year, including 4 months this summer. Initial reports missed job gains from June to September by a cumulative 626,000 jobs. According to the Washington Post, that's the largest underestimation of any other comparable period going back to 1979.
And I saw this in the Washington Post about that statistic. Here's how the updated job numbers changes the economic growth narrative, which is why this is so important. They write, the revisions have recast the narrative of a summer slowdown. In August, when economists expected a strong follow-up to the 943,000 jobs the economy added in July, the Bureau of Labor Statistics announced the U.S. had added only 235,000 jobs. Headlines dubbed it a, quote, colossal miss as job growth took a, quote, giant step back. 2 months later, revisions based on additional data showed August jobs grew by 483,000 more than double the anemic original reading. It was the biggest positive revision in almost 4 decades. And this, President Biden may have even paid a political price for the lackluster job numbers. From April to June, polls found that most Americans, 51%, approved of Biden's handling of the economy, according to an average of polls from Fox, NBC, Quinnipiac, and The Post. But as bad economic numbers came out and the national political climate turned south, those numbers fell steadily. In October, just 39% approved of Biden's handling of the economy, while 57% disapproved. It matters so much as to what this mistake does to the narrative, to the perception, because that's what politics is, perception. It's how you feel, not necessarily what the truth is. You find out the truth, it might change how you feel, but most people probably won't ever know this. Certainly something the Democrats should try to find a way to message about, though. And now I've got an audio recap, an audio roundup of sorts, recapping yesterday's circus of events around the horrifying video that Representative Congressman Paul Gosar tweeted out and shared. He was censured and removed from committee, and here is how it all went down yesterday. Again, Paul Gosar, whose entire, 5 siblings think he's a sociopath, who tweeted anime video of him depicting killing Congresswoman Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And so he was censured, and there's a bunch of audio I've got for you. I was interested in hearing this, and as disgusting as it all is, I think it's important. So Congressman James Clyburn, start out with him, Democrat of South Carolina, called out Republicans over their silence on Paul Gosar's violent video on CNN yesterday morning. We'll start with that. And by the way, in this clip, that James Clyburn is wearing a very Mr. Rogers cardigan sweater and tie, and I don't know, he looks very warm, but he seems very hot over this.
Quite frankly, the Republican conference has some responsibility here. They have been totally silent on this. What is that about? How, I just don't understand how we can, as members of Congress, expect for the public to respect us when we don't demonstrate that respect ourselves.
All right, here's a little bit more from Congressman Clyburn on CNN yesterday.
And when someone sends out a tweet or any other illustration of him or her murdering somebody on the House floor, that to me goes far beyond the pale, and that person should not even be a member of this body. In fact, a lot of his family members are telling the whole world that he should not be a member of Congress. And I think it would have been the right thing to do to move to expel him. And when someone sends out a tweet or any other illustration of him or her murdering somebody on the House floor, that to me goes far beyond the pale, and that person should not even be a member of this body. In fact, a lot of his family members are telling the whole world that he should not be a member of Congress. And I think it would have been the right thing to do to move to expel him.
Well, they didn't move to expel him, but that was Congressman James Clyburn on CNN yesterday morning. And then yesterday, here's how the New York Times put it, a bitterly divided U.S. House of Representatives voted narrowly on Wednesday to censure Representative Paul Gosar, Republican of Arizona, for posting an animated video that depicted him killing a Democratic congresswoman and assaulting President Biden. The formal rebuke of the far-right congressman who has allied himself with white nationalists, the first censure since 2010 and only the 24th in the history of the Republic, also stripped him of his committee assignments. The vast majority of Republicans opposed the move against Mr. Gosar, whose conduct GOP leaders have refused to publicly condemn, the latest sign of the party's growing tolerance of menacing statements. The vote was 223 to 207, with just 2 Republicans, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, joining Democrats in favor. One other Republican, David Joyce of Ohio, voted present. Well, I'll have to remind my dad, his Republican congressman in Syracuse, who he likes so much and is always defending, John Katko, harsh critic of Trump's, and he voted to impeach him. And anyway, he's a moderate, as today's Republicans go. But somehow he didn't vote to censure Paul Gosar, who is the absolute worst. All right, so let's go to the House floor, and I've got a bunch of short clips from both Democrats and these Republicans who defended Gosar. Let's start with my congressman, who I love. It's Mondaire Jones of New York's 17th District. Minute-long clip here. Fire.
Madam Speaker, not since the Civil War has Congress operated under the constant threat of violence from some of its own members. But here we are. That is the behavior that Mr. Gosar has encouraged. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised, having watched so many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle incite and then express support for the insurrectionists who nearly killed us in this chamber on January 6th. We cannot let the Republican Party make Congress the only workplace in America where violence against your coworkers is not a crime but a credential. If we don't hold people like Mr. Gosar accountable, we will only embolden the worst people in our politics to bring their fever dreams to life. That is why today we are standing up for the safety of our colleagues, for the safety of Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, and for the future of our democracy. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
And now let's check in with another very effective speaker and Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. He hits at Republicans defending Paul Gosar in this clip.
It is remarkable to me, Madam Speaker, that we have colleagues who think we should do nothing in the face of a member of the United States House of Representatives who posts an animated cartoon video of him killing a colleague.
And now let's check in with Congressman and almost cartoonish, buffoonish high school bully Matt Gaetz defending Paul Gosar.
Anime is fiction to the point of the absurd. It's not really my thing, and it does glorify violence, but often to symbolize conflict, not realistic harm to another person. In the last session week we had, we reviewed Steve Bannon's podcast. Today, we're critiquing Paul Gosar's anime. Next week, we might be indicting the Wile E. Coyote for an explosive ordinance against the Roadrunner.
Oh, I messed up the line, and it wasn't a great one. That's bad. Just telling you from a comedy point of view. If your joke isn't good and you messed it up, it's much more brutal. And Matt Gaetz, a swing and a miss. And you know everybody's going to have a lot of fun with him saying, anime's not my thing. I prefer real, actual, underage women. That's my thing, allegedly. All right, here is the sociopath himself, or at least that's what his own siblings call him. Here's Paul Gosar in his own defense, and I promise you just a couple more.
Last week, my staff posted a video depicting a policy battle regarding amnesty for tens of millions of illegal aliens. This is an enemy that speaks to young voters who are too often overlooked. Even Twitter, the left's mouthpiece, did not remove the cartoon, noting it was in the public's interest for it to remain. The cartoon directly contributes to the understanding and the discussion of the real-life battle resulting from this administration's open border policies. This body is considering passage of Mr. Biden's reckless, socialist, Marxist $4.9 trillion spending bill that provides $100 billion for amnesty to tens of millions of illegal aliens already in this country. This is what the left doesn't want the American people to know. Our country is suffering from the plague of illegal immigration. I don't stop pointing this out, nor will I.
Okay, so he has no problem with it. He's not defending himself, and he said even Twitter, the left's mouthpiece. The left's mouthpiece? Okay, well, there's that, and then two more. Kevin McCarthy is the House Minority Leader, and, I mean, just not a serious person. I'll play a little bit of his comments as the House debated Representative Gosar's censure over this stupid video.
It's an old definition of abuse of power. Rules for thee, but not for me. That's exactly what's happening here today. House Democrats are preparing once again to break another precedent of the United States House of Representatives. It's an open secret that the American people are facing substantial challenges today.
But why does he talk like that, by the way? Why does he deliver his speeches this way? Like there's some kind of epic oratory, like he's JFK every time he's talking. I mean, is that how he talks all the time? He's talking to his wife about what they need at the grocery store. There are many things that we need at the grocery store. Things like eggs and also milk, many quarts of milk, because that is what represents who we are the most, milk lovers.
Many of these challenges are Washington-inflicted of one-party rule caused by a Biden administration incompetence and radicalism.
The Biden administration's radicalism, right.
Absolute chaos on the southern border. Out-of-control crime. Record-breaking gas prices and inflation. A broken supply chain. A historic labor shortage. A failing education system, and of course, the humiliating surrender in Afghanistan. Will this Congress be remembered as a Congress that addressed those serious challenges? Not a chance. Instead, I believe this Congress will go down in history as the broken Congress.
Okay, well, we've heard enough from him. I mean, I can't take it anymore. Here is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez responding to Kevin McCarthy and Republicans who would not vote to censure Paul Gosar. And, of course, she was one of the targets of this video.
What I believe is unprecedented is for a member of House leadership of either party to be unable to condemn incitement of violence against a member of this body. It is sad. It is a sad day in which a member who leads a political party in the United States of America cannot bring themselves to say that issuing a depiction of murdering a member of Congress is wrong, and instead decides to venture off into a tangent about gas prices and inflation. What is so hard? What is so hard about saying that this is wrong? This is not about me. This is not about Representative Gosar, but this is about what we are willing to accept. Not just the Republican leader, but I have seen other members of this party advance the argument, including Representative Gosar himself, the illusion that this was just a joke.
All right, and there's a lot more floor speeches that were made on both sides if you're interested, but that is a quick roundup and recap, and damn, I edited that well. Good context. Well done, Pete. Oof. For those of you that heard a terrible edit on the Tuesday show, I guess it was, with John Avalon, when I had the end of the show playing over his introduction, and I don't know how long that went for. Was it a minute? Oh, brutal. I am so sorry for that mistake. I quickly got it fixed, but I wasn't even home when I found out. I was driving my daughter to school, so thanks for all of you. Always tell me when there is a problem with the edit, whether it's 5 seconds of silence that seems wrong or something nightmarish like that the other day, then let me know. But that shit I just did was tight. Checked it and rechecked it. Yeah, like I said last night, by the way, I in other news in the last 24, I hung out with Glenn Kirshner last night, had a bunch of beers and shots with Kirshner at a bar in Midtown, and then a great time, really fun, love hanging out with him, and we tweeted out a picture of him like kissing me, you know, the bald white heads thing. And then just now, as I'm sitting here editing, I'm looking at Twitter trying to find some more sound, and I see there is a picture with Glenn Kirshner and Dean Obeidallah. Apparently they had coffee this morning. Kirshner is a real slut. Dean Obeidallah always getting my sloppy seconds. All right, here is Joe Biden, the President of the United States, pitching to Build Back Better at a General Motors plant in Michigan yesterday. President Biden called for higher taxes on corporations, and he also called out the GM CEO at GM.
And again, no one in America earning less than $400,000 will pay a single penny more in federal taxes. No one. And you say, well, how are you doing that, Joe? Well, I tell you what, real simple. I come from the corporate capital of the world. More corporations incorporated in my state of Delaware than all states combined. And guess what? They ain't paying enough. Sorry, Mary.
All right. He was visiting Detroit. He was at the grand opening for GM's Factory Zero plant. Part of his tour promoting the newly signed $1.2 trillion infrastructure measure, which he said will fund improvements of road, bridges, and broadband for everyday Americans. That's where GM is going to build its all-electric lineup in what used to be the Hamtramck assembly plant. Factory Zero has been given a second chance at life, reshaped to make electric cars and trucks.
For most of the 21st century, we led the world by a significant margin because we invested in our people. We invested in ourselves. But something went wrong along the way. We stopped. We risked losing our edge as a nation. And China and the rest of the world are catching up. Well, we're about to turn that around in a big, big way. We're going to be building again. We're going to be moving again.
And in this final clip from the GM plant, where he drove an electric Hummer, which looked pretty cool. Joe Biden addresses electric vehicles and the need to invest in them and kisses the ass of the GM CEO, Mary Barra, who he had taken a shot at.
When you see these projects starting in your hometowns, I want you to feel the way I feel, pride in what we can do when we're together as the United States of America. And it starts here in Detroit. In the auto industry, Detroit's leading the world in electric vehicles. You know how critical it is? Mary, I can remember talking to you way back in January about the need for America to lead in electric vehicles. And I can remember your dramatic announcement that by 2035, GM would be 100% electric. You changed the whole story, Mary, wherever you are. There you are. You did, Mary. You electrified the entire automobile industry. I'm serious. You led, and it matters. And drastically improving the climate by reducing hundreds of millions of barrels of oil that will not be used when we're all electric.
All right, well, the president's going to be out there selling what this infrastructure plan means for the country, for the planet, for the economy, and I'll keep playing those clips because it's important that folks know about what's actually happening and not forget how significant this investment is. All right, and finally for you, I've got some of the Fauci. Here is Dr. Anthony Fauci, the Bipartisan Policy Center yesterday, urging Americans to get vaccinated.
This will end, Bill. We are not going to be going through this indefinitely. How quickly we get to the end depends on us. How well we vaccinate, how well we get boosted, and how well we do the kinds of things to protect ourselves.
The guy just hates ours. Brooklyn accent. Boosted. And here's one more.
If you get vaccinated and your family's vaccinated, you can feel good about enjoying a typical Thanksgiving, Christmas with your family and close friends.
All right, there is your audio roundup, last 24. And now I've got to get to the rest of the headlines, a rapid fire style and what we call the news dump. But before I do, I want to remind you, I cannot do this podcast each and every day without your support. It's my full-time job. Please consider a paid subscription if you enjoy it, if you get a lot out of it, if you listen to it often. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic, and also supporting the show, I got to tell you about Indeed. Indeed.com is a hiring partner that gets you what you really want. A short list of quality candidates as fast as possible because you can do it all. Attract, interview, and hire all at Indeed. Don't struggle on your own trying to network amongst people that you know. Widen your net. You got to find a quality candidate for the gig. Indeed can help you hire the right people right now. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process so you can find talent with the skills you need through tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. Longtime listener, founder, and CEO of Motion City Media, Frank Zarinsky, says Indeed did it again. I just wrapped up an interview with a gentleman named Adam that came to us through a paid Indeed ad. This guy's a total wow, and he'll be a perfect fit with Motion City Media. He's kind and compassionate about film, and we cannot wait to begin working with him. So Frank is using Indeed.com, and it's going well for his company. Indeed makes it easier for 4-star applicants to shine with over 135 assessment tests. From cooking to coding, you pick what skills are important to you from over 135 assessments. You get a clear view of your top talents, abilities, faster. Assessments make the interview process smoother for everybody. Talent doesn't need to prove themselves again and again. And I should know because I'm very talented and I've had to do this. No, you can dive deeper into talking about what's more important to you and your company. With Indeed Assessments, you can reduce hiring time by 12%, according to Indeed data worldwide. Get started right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/standup. Get a $75 credit at Indeed.com/standup. Indeed.com/standup. Offer valid through December 31st. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. All right, we did it again. Let's get to that news dump. which, by the way, didn't get to the news last night because for yesterday's show, because I was out hanging out with Glenn Kirshner, and Dan from Southern California said he listened to the show. He loved Brian Rosenwald, but he also said it's kind of depressing when you don't have the news segment, Pete. I'm not suicidal on those days, but I do feel like I'm not whole on those days. Please don't ever consider scaling back the news portion of your podcast. Many of us rely heavily on it Monday through Thursday. Sure would love if you had a Friday segment. Keep up the good work. Thanks, Pete. Oh, Dan, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Now hit it, Pete Co.
Spank's first class ticket got you nowhere and you're stumped. You thought it was in England for today's news dump.
Wait, Glasgow is in Scotland?
I see what you guys did there. Yes, I have said several times Glasgow, England, in reference to the COP26 conference. That jingle performed by the great Pete Co., written by the great Carrie Williams. Love to see listener collaborations, no matter how badly they hurt me. Okay, let me start with a terrible, deadly headline. Drug overdose deaths fueled by fentanyl hit record high in U.S. Nation records more than 100,000 fatalities over 12 months for the first time. And this, like everything else, is directly related to the pandemic in so many different ways. And I have to do a segment on fentanyl. I want to learn everything about it, how it gets here, what's in it, how it's sold, who's selling it, what we're doing to stop it. And the Biden administration, for its part, noted that it put $4 billion in funding from the COVID-19 relief package known as the American Rescue Plan toward combating overdose deaths, including expanding services for substance use disorder and mental health. So at least there's that effort coming out of Washington, and of course programs in different states nationwide. And of course we need to destigmatize use of these opiates, and the opioid epidemic continues in the United States of America. 100,000 people. My Lord. Definitely got to do a segment on that. The two men convicted of killing Malcolm X will be exonerated. In 1966, convictions of two men are expected to be thrown out after a lengthy investigation validating long-held doubts about who killed the civil rights leader. Fascinating story. That's I'm reading from the New York Times. How about this one? The beach that was made famous in the Leonardo DiCaprio film, 1998 film, The Beach, which is actually a book by Alex, what's his name? Great book. First, before a movie. Anyway, The Beach is reopened nearly 3 years after the public was barred from the idyllic beach that featured the Leonardo DiCaprio movie. Tourists will once again be able to come back. The closure of Thailand's Maya Bay was supposed to be just 4 months, but extended to achieve rehabilitation of its natural resources, which apparently has happened. So that's pretty cool. NBC News reports tourists won't be able to run around willy-nilly. However, visits will be restricted to 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. period, with only 300 people permitted, 1 per hour time slot. All right, so there you go. Secretary of State Antony Blinken making his first trip to Africa amid growing crises in Ethiopia and Sudan. The U.S. be touting the millions of vaccines donated to the continent as well. 10 months into his 10-year, Secretary of State Blinken will bring Joe Biden's America's Back mantra to the world's youngest continent, according to ABC News. He's in Kenya, and he's going to travel to Nigeria and Senegal in a 5-day trip. Notably, he's going to skip Ethiopia, so you can read into that, but high concerns about the bloody war there. Catholic bishops approved a document that fell short of denying communion to President Biden or other politicians who support abortion rights. So good guys within the bad guys won that one. And how about this terrible headline for the Biden administration? The Biden administration, this is NPR, Biden administration sold oil and gas leases just days after the climate summit. Days after President Joe Biden told world leaders that his administration is committed to slowing climate change with action, not words, his Interior Department oversaw one of the largest oil and gas lease sales in American history. 80 million acres of the Gulf of Mexico, an area twice the size of Florida, was put on the auction block on Wednesday. How about that? Environmentalists decried the lease auction. This is an administration that campaigned on dealing with climate change. That's why this lease sale is so disappointing, because it's the most significant action that the administration will have taken on oil and gas development, and it goes in the wrong direction. Drew Caputo, an attorney at Earth Justice, said yesterday. Earthquake shakes part of the Ozarks Wednesday night. Shout out to listeners in Arkansas. 4.0 magnitude earthquake shook the region. Did you guys feel it? Let me know. Beto O'Rourke raised $2 million first 24 hours of launching his gubernatorial campaign. My friend Addison went to a rally with his wife Cassie last night and met Beto O'Rourke. Sent me a picture. It's pretty cool. Do you think he can win? And here's a fun final story. A teenager was accidentally invited to a grandma's Thanksgiving dinner. 6 years later, he's still going back. Look at the Guardian's accidental grandma story, Thanksgiving story by Alexandra Villarreal. It's pretty fun. Okay, out of time for today's news, and now time to get to, like I said earlier, one of the best interviews I've done for the podcast. My first guest joining me is, and I got a great conversation coming up with a longtime listener, Ryan in Kansas. Is also staunch conservative. He was out on the farm. We had a great conversation, which I'm happy to share with you today, and would love to do this with more listeners, especially if we have varying opinions. But right now, I've got a guy joining me for the first time who is a real life icon, a legend in his world of mountaineering, and he's an adventurer who's during his career, he's also been an environmentalist, a writer, a filmmaker, a businessman, and part of the 1978 team was the first Americans to summit K2, the world's second highest mountain. Since 2005, he's overseen environmental affairs at outdoor clothing company Patagonia. Actually left there a couple of years ago. But he's also authored 6 books, dozens of magazine articles, produced and directed many other documentary films. I could talk about this guy's work for a long time, but I just want you to hear our interview. He is a writer and advocate for sustainability and conservation initiatives, and he won the Lifetime Achievement Award in Adventure, and that's a National Geographic Award. And his new memoir is what I interviewed him about, Life Lived Wild. It was just released last month. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time ever on Stand Up, the great Rick Ridgeway. Okay, so joining me for the very first time, never spoken to him, known of his work for a long time, know some of the people that he knows, but I'm really excited to be talking to the legend. Rick Ridgeway is here. Welcome to Stand Up. Thank you so much for joining me. It's a huge honor.
Oh, Pete, happy to join. I don't know about the legend part.
I know I figure you're like a modest guy who has a deep understanding of ego, but nonetheless, when I told my friend Steve Chase that I'd be interviewing you, and he's been a mountaineer his whole life, Steve said to me, Rick Ridgeway is the real Indiana Jones. We all wanted to be him in the 80s. How does that suit you?
Well, I remember at a conference once where I gave a presentation about one of my adventures. Afterwards, I was standing in the lobby and everybody was telling me how cool it was and, you know, what a legend I was. And they looked at my wife, Jennifer, standing next to me and said, what's it like being with a legend? And she kind of raised her eyebrow and said, a legend in his own mind. She was always she always managed to check my ego at the door and really taught me, you know, how to do that. But then it was continuing to kind of rise like a phoenix on its own. So I don't know about the legend stuff. Well,
I love it. And I'm happy to hear you bring up your wife. You lost her, 2 years ago now?
Yeah, a little over 2 years. She died from cancer.
But you were together for 40 years. Is that right?
Yeah, we just south of 40 years. Yep.
You're a 72-year-old man now?
I am, yeah. And 72.
It seems like you put a lot of pretty much everything you've done and experienced into this beautiful book. Congratulations, Life Lived Wild, Adventures at the Edge of the Map. I got to tell you, I've cried several times, and more importantly, I got the chills just to be talking to you. I'm super excited to talk to you about your book and why you decided to write it at this point in your life.
Yeah, a memoir. I guess when you get into your 70s, that becomes time to write a memoir. But it had a more accidental genesis when coming back from a project in Patagonia, the place down south in Chile, working on a film with my old buddy Jimmy Chin that he was making on another one of my colleagues, Chris Tompkins, and her work down there, saving protected areas. You know, anyway, there we were in the Santiago airport on our way home with another mutual friend, Timmy O'Neill, and the three of us were on a long layover in the airport bar. And I started telling stories like I often do. And they were just sitting there wide-eyed listening to me talk about, going into K2 in the 70s, where we had to hire over 400 porters to carry our stuff. And they said, 400 porters? Whoa. And I said, yeah, well, actually just 320 to carry our stuff. And then, another 60 or 70 to carry the food for the 320 carrying our stuff. And then we realized we need another 10 or 15 for the porters that were carrying food for the 320. And they're listening and they go, dude, you got to start an Instagram account. Well, by the time we boarded the plane, I had an Instagram account. I had done my first post. They did, showing me how to do it. And then I started to get these, what the kids call followers, like groupies or something. I don't know. Anyway, pretty soon, my middle daughter, who had followed her mother's footsteps as the photo editor at Patagonia, with another colleague there in the marketing department, said, Rick, you got to turn your Instagram account into a book. So I did that, Pete. I wrote up stories of some of my adventures, and those ended up being like 50 chapters. And it was not a book, it was a doorstop. So another friend of mine who was a editor and also a character in my book, if you will, Candace Davenport.
Yeah.
Candace convinced me to turn those 50 disparate stories into a memoir. And I saw, she helped guide me into why that might be a more fulfilling outcome for telling my life story. And I took her up on that. And she guided me also to, in the retelling of those stories, to open myself up more to, be bold, to be honest and transparent with any potential readers that might be interested in your story about who you are and what happened to you during these stories and what changed you. And maybe most importantly, she challenged me to try to figure out, what's the thread of your life, Rick? Like where did you start and where are you at now? And why is your journey, why should it be something that other people would want to listen to? What could they take from it? So I had to reflect on those things. It took me months to think it through and then go into a deep rewrite where 50 stories became 25 and then eventually the book that you've got in your hands there, Pete.
Well, I would love to read the other 25 for what it's worth. The book has really affected me. Your work has really affected me. What you've learned and shared with your readers makes a huge impact on someone who certainly is open to wanting to change and to evolve the way you have. So mission accomplished, at least with this reader. Why did you ever want to climb mountains? I mean, it seems like a dangerous and crazy thing. Why did you want to climb mountains, and why do other people want to climb mountains?
It's also ostensibly kind of pointless, isn't it?
I mean, I don't want to be a dick.
The great French alpinist Lionel Terray, he titled his memoir "Conquistadors of the Useless," and that has always been a title that amused me and others of my friends, like especially Yvonne Chouinard and Doug Tompkins. We all loved that book, the title of that book, because it represented the absurdity of our passion for climbing mountains, but it also invited the question that you just asked, like, if it's absurd, why do you even do it? And the answer is in the details of the doing. That what I learned over my lifetime of mountaineering, and this is kind of a backwards way of answering your question, but towards the end, in the second half anyway, of this lifelong passion for climbing mountains, Yvonne and Doug and others, especially of the generation preceding me, the climbers that came out of the 50s and 60s, who were all in the main countercultural rebels, they learned early on that it wasn't about getting to the top of something or to the summit, but it was about the process of getting there. And it was about the inward transformation that doing something as absurd as trying to climb a mountain can actually provide the time that you necessarily have to spend in wildness and nature, and how that can shape who you think you are and how you go about trying to be who you are. All those things were really informed by climbing, by the process. And so in the book, I summarized it by explaining to my readers that I learned over the years it wasn't really about the summit, it was about the footsteps to get there. And so this process of climbing itself, the 1 foot in front of the other, that was the attraction of being in the wildest parts of the world, in the setting, in the majestic setting of the highest mountains in the world, with people that were at their hearts rebels, looking for different ways of living their lives and bringing back to their lives from the high altitudes to sea level, insights that were fresh and new for me. And then just going to those wild places to the edge of the map, even off the edge of the map, hence the subtitle of my book, where when I was out into the wild parts of the world in the 60s and 70s and 80s, there were still parts of the world that were literally blank on the map, where the maps that we brought into the wilderness actually had sections where they said geographic information unknown. Mm-hmm. Those were just intrigues and attractions that I couldn't resist. And you roll them up together, and I suppose that's the answer to your question.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's probably a lot more to that answer, but I'm really curious as to what you've learned. And you write a lot about what you've learned. And I mentioned that obviously mountaineering and all of the outdoors things that you do are dangerous, or they certainly can be. You write intimately about losing at least two people so far that I've read, two good friends of yours. And I wanted to just talk about not only what you learned from them and those incidents, but what you've learned from other people who haven't passed on, who are still certainly in your life, like Asia and Jimmy and so many other people that you write about. But I thought maybe we could start about talking about Jonathan Wright.
Well, I met Jonathan in the mid-'70s when we were both invited to join what back then was only the second American expedition to successfully climb Everest. And in a lot of ways, Jonathan and I were opposites. He had already spent quite a bit of time in the Himalayas. He had hitchhiked across Asia, really just out of high school and going into college, to build a portfolio of photographs that he used to get a position at a very early age as a photographer with National Geographic. And he had continued to explore Asia, but always with the passion to kind of look, as it were, under the skin, to really deeply inspect some of the philosophies, especially of Buddhism, that he encountered in the world's highest regions, and to look inwardly into himself and use those learnings to try to transform who he was and how he went about his own life and what his values were. And I was more, the extroverted guy who was, there on that Everest expedition to really get to the top, to be like my childhood mentor, Jim Whittaker, the first American to climb Everest, whose photograph standing on the summit in National Geographic in the 60s had really inspired me to want to be a mountaineer. Him standing on top of Everest, holding his ice axe up with the American flag tied to it, whipped in the hurricane winds. I wanted to be that guy. And as I started to try to become that guy, it was all about reaching the top and the summit. I realized, looking back on it now over my life, that I think a lot of it had its origins in my youth and my parents and the connection my dad had to World War II, and merging out of that, how American culture just seemed to be so focused on this idea of winning, on this idea of domination, on this idea of being the best. And, that really informed my views about climbing and mountaineering in the 70s as I went to Everest. And that's why I decided to open the book, because the first story is about that trip to Everest when I first met Jonathan. And I first started to get a sense from him, very indirectly, not just a sense, but a very mild challenge to think about why I was there and what I was hoping to get out of it. And was it some kind of potential personal transformation? He never explicitly challenged me, but he indirectly laid out these ideas that there could be other things you might get out of an experience like trying to climb Everest, other than just getting to the summit of the highest mountain in the world. So that was Jonathan. That was the beginning of our friendship. That was the beginning of some of the lessons I learned from him, especially on that first adventure that we shared on Everest.
What happened to him? You guys were together. There was an avalanche.
Well, between Everest and the avalanche, we became closer friends, and we started to develop projects that we could do together. Me as writer and he as photographer. We had successfully sold some of those ideas to National Geographic, and they had given us commissions to do articles together. The most immediate of which was a story on Mount Everest National Park, which in the late 70s and early 80s had just been created. So Jonathan had gone out to Nepal to get the initial photographs for that project. And we were in the middle of the project when we were both invited to join another one to attempt a mountain in eastern Tibet called Minyakonka, nearly 25,000 feet high, in a region that back in the late 70s and early 80s had not been visited by any outsiders for over 50 years. So it was an opportunity to go to this almost unknown region that had been little explored with a team of close friends. And just the adventure alone seemed reason enough for the climb, or notwithstanding the climb. And Jonathan was a cameraman on a film being made about the adventure, the expedition, and I was the producer, as well as one of the on-camera climbers on the team. And Yvonne was along, and other close friends of mine. It was kind of a dream come true. So we made an arrangement with National Geographic to work with the Chinese to get us permission after the climb to cross Tibet to Lhasa and then go into Nepal to finish our story there and maybe do another story on the opening of Tibet, because we were the first we were among the first outside expeditions allowed into the People's Republic of China in 1980, the first year it opened its doors. So this was like it was like a dream come true. We were just kids in a sense, we were just beside ourselves over the potential in front of us. And after that, we had more and more ideas on projects we could do together. And we were just getting to be best friends. We were so close, professionally and spiritually and in so many ways. Well, then on the side of Minyakonka, as I write in my book, we triggered an avalanche, 4 of us, including Yvonne and Jonathan and a 4th close friend, Kim Schmitz. And we were swept down the side of the mountain, 1,500 vertical feet. And I think the avalanche must have taken over 60 seconds, over a minute. And that's a long, long time to be, riding a sea of snow, thundering down the side of the mountain, literally going over a cliff, down a gully. That whole time, I just assumed I was dead. I didn't know, I couldn't imagine any way I was going to get out of that alive. But then it slowed as it found out on an alluvium and then stopped. And somehow I was still alive. But my companions were all injured, and I was the least injured of the 4. I quickly realized that. So I had to try to help them as best I could. Yvonne had a apparent concussion and was bleeding out of his mouth. And Kim was in real pain with, what turned out to be dislocated knees and a broken back. And Jonathan was the worst. And I held him in my arms, giving him mouth to mouth, trying to keep him conscious, looking into his eyes, telling him we're all still alive. We're going to get out of this okay. But after about a half hour, he died while I was holding him in my arms. And the next day we buried him where he died on the side of the mountain.
I appreciate you sharing that with me. You write all about it in your book, and people should read it. And I know it must be, not fun, to say the least, to keep talking about it in interviews while you're promoting the book. So I appreciate that. You write also that a couple of years after that, you're with Yvonne in a car on your way to go surfing. And he was with you, as you mentioned, that day. And you write, I still hadn't decided to return to mountaineering. We hadn't talked about the avalanche. I knew it made him uncomfortable, but I decided to bring it up. My need to talk about it overcoming his reticence. I think about the avalanche all the time, I said. About Jonathan's death. So do I, he replied. Every day. That's all we said. We never talked about it again. And then you write, maybe we should have, and you continue discussing it there. But I thought about that so much. What is it about you, him, mountaineers, men? Why would you have not talked about that at length for 2 years, even?
I think you just answered the question. Because we're men. That may be the most honest answer of all, Pete, as I think about it. I mean, really, if it had been an all-woman team and 2 female teammates had that experience, I bet they would have talked about it more than we did as men growing up in the 50s and 60s and 70s, where somehow we got into our bones this idea that we didn't really reveal ourselves intimately and openly like that, that we had a reticence about revealing ourselves. And whatever the cause, that we seldom talk deep in ourselves about our most inner fears and concerns. I think young people now, are men and women, are more predisposed to openness about such things in their friendships. And I know they are, because I can see that in my own children. And that's a very positive evolution of our culture and our beliefs and attitudes by which we all comport ourselves. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know, but we didn't talk about it much. But the problem was, the challenge was the origin of the burden was that we had made a mistake. Like we should have known, we should have assessed the snow conditions better than we did. And we'd all failed to manage the risk. And that's one of the fundamental skills of a mountaineer, that probably most fundamentally is the origin of whether you survive or not. And we hadn't managed the risk, and we shouldn't have been descending the slope the way we did, perhaps, or maybe we should have had a rest day that day because there had been snowfall the previous 2 days. Maybe we should have paid more attention to a slight layering between the new and the old snow. All things we could have done in reflection, looking backwards. We made mistakes, and we all had to carry that burden. We still do. And I've written about it. So
yeah, I that's not good to carry that guilt.
Well, I don't know. What if you didn't carry it? What if you didn't think about it for years and try to learn from it, guilt or not? What if you avoided the guilt by dismissing the memory? That would be even worse. So I'm not sure that it's a bad thing to not just carry it, but to try to think about it, to continue to develop your own life, and not just develop your skills so you don't make the same mistake,
sure,
but to really reflect on the luck of surviving something like that, of the opportunity to continue to live. Like, you come close to death like that, in a way, you go over the side. You you're looking into that dark abyss and you actually are falling into it. And somehow you get pulled back out into the daylight and you live. Well, what are you going to do with that experience to live your life in a different way? How are you going to use that experience to change your life, to live it more fully, to live it with more integrity? And in that way, perhaps honor your friends who didn't make it through.
I think everything you just said is super thoughtful. Would you forgive me for a presumptuous psychoanalysis?
Please, go ahead.
Well, you lost your wife a couple of years ago. You had 40-year marriage, and from the book and other interviews, it seems like a magical relationship in so many ways that anybody could be lucky to have. And it seems that you do, and you talk in the epilogue about her funeral, and have done a great job at, living the way she would wanted you to. And I'm sure you had plenty of talks because you had 40 years to get to know each other. But do you not think that Jonathan would have wanted you to, not carry the guilt because he was there with you? He made those choices too that day.
Well, not to carry the guilt if that guilt were to obstruct the opportunity to live more fully and live differently. Yeah. But to use the guilt, as it were, to improve yourself, of course he would have supported that. Right. And let's not overstate this, that I didn't come out of there as some paragon of virtue by any means. I continue to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. I continued to misbehave. I continue, in a perhaps Christian way, I had my handful of sins and, like all of us. But I do believe that over time, those near-death experiences over my lifetime is what I meant to say, have given me opportunity to reflect on how I live my life and to try to do the best job I could. And a lot of that's what the book's about, as you know, having read it.
Yeah. And I just love it so much. Forgive me for belaboring that point, but you're thoughtful. You've clearly thought a lot about it, and I really appreciate that. Years later, Jonathan's daughter, Asia, he named her after apparently the favorite place he loved to go in the world. You stayed in touch with her and became like a surrogate father, I guess. Tell me about what she asked you to do years later.
Well, when Jonathan died, her father died, she was 13 months old. And, I made a vow the day after he died to be there for her, for him. And Yvonne was that way too. But we stayed in touch with her, but it was loose. A couple, 3 years at a time would go by without seeing her, but then we would re-engage. And, we kept in touch with each other. We both of us would see her as she grew up every once in a while, and sometimes spend a few days with her and our own kids who became friends, all palling around together. She joined that, posse of her contemporaries, Yvonne's children and my own. And then when she was in her late teens, she came out for the summer to work as an intern, staying with my wife and me and our kids. And at the end of that summer, she said she wanted to have a talk with me. And I had anticipated she would want to sit down and talk about how her father had died, about the avalanche, because afterwards her mother had really shut him out of their lives. And so I did. I told her about how he had died, and I didn't hold back. But then at the end of the conversation, she said that's not why she wanted to talk to me. It's because she had a favor, and that favor was to take her back to take her to Tibet, to Minyakanka, and climb up the side of the mountain and find her father's grave. And I told her I had to think about it. I was actually shocked when she asked me that. I had never anticipated such a thing. And I went to my wife, and Jennifer said, well, of course you're going, because Age is not asking you just to find her father. She's asking you to be her father. And, once again, for the nearly probably immeasurable number of times in my marriage to Jennifer, she showed how much wiser she was than me to things like this. And and so I decided I would, take Asia on an extended adventure, because I knew that's what her father would have done if he hadn't died. Surely she would have been with him on many of his adventures, and surely he would have continued to go on adventures just as I did. So we went back to Everest, and we trekked with the Sherpas, who were my friends that had been her father's friends that became her friends. And we ventured out to the western end of Tibet, where few outsiders had ever been. And we made the first ascent of a 21,000-foot peak in a really remote place that was not only unclimbed, but was even unnamed. And then we crossed Tibet to the other side and eventually ascended the side of Minyakonka and found her father's grave. But all those years later, it was in disrepair. I just imagined maybe a snow leopard had overturned the rocks we placed over his body, and his bones were scattered around, and his daughter and I had to gather them up and put him back together and rebuild the grave. And, we were together for weeks on that trip, and I shared with her during those weeks the stories of my adventures that I also share with the reader in the book, and some of the things I learned from those adventures that I share in the book that I shared with her. And back home, over the years, the trip had an enormous influence on both of us. And for her especially, it gave her the inner strength to reset her relationship with her mother, which had been strained, to solidify that on her terms, which really worked, and to develop a self-confidence that led to a marriage and her own family and very successful careers for her and her husband. And she got off on her own path in a way that I think she would have been able to achieve had her father not died in my arms all those years before. And of course, I felt really fulfilled about that. And she came into our family as like an adopted daughter. And she and my kids are still really close friends, and she lives not too far away. So that's been a very gratifying outcome from my close friend's death. And I feel good about that vow I made all those years before, the day after he died, to try to be there for him.
What a wonderful story. Thank you so much for sharing that, and read again more about that trip in the book. I want to talk with you about your work at Patagonia. I want to talk with you about your work at One Earth and just climate issues. But I also know we only have a few more minutes left, and that's kind of one of my, I hope we could talk again, but what I wanted to do is help listeners learn what readers do and hopefully get the book and learn it there, but just learn more of what you learned. And so you also lost your good friend Doug Tompkins a few years back in a kayaking trip, and that was highly publicized because of who all of you now were in your lives, all very accomplished men in your own right. And I wondered also what happened there and what you learned from your friendship with Doug, because he seemed like a really, I know as we talked earlier, people who know him, and he seemed like just an amazing person.
Yeah, he was a one-off. I've never met anybody like him. I doubt I ever will. He, of course, founded the North Face when he was just in his 20s. He dropped out of school in the 10th grade. He sold the North Face to put the money into his wife's little company making women's dresses, and they renamed that Esprit. He built that with her into $1 billion company. And when that marriage ended, he sold his half of the business and used the money to buy ranches and estancias in Chile and Argentina and cobbled them together into new protected areas that eventually became new national parks. Then along the way, he married Chris McDivitt, who at that time was the founding CEO of Yvonne's company, his climbing partner and his best friend, who had, of course, started Patagonia. And Chris, after running the company from under $1 million in sales to $120 million in sales, moved to Chile and Argentina to join Doug and continue the projects of creating protected areas that now total more than 18 million acres of new national parks, making the work that Chris and Doug did together the biggest conservation victory in the history of wildland philanthropy. There's never been an achievement close to what they've done together. And a few years ago in 2015, as we usually did once a year, we were on an adventure together with Yvonne. We called ourselves the Do Boys because we like to do stuff instead of just talking about stuff, doing stuff. And on a lake, a large lake in Patagonia, one day on a paddle trip, a multi-day excursion along a remote shore of this lake, we got hit by some severe crosswinds, and Yvonne, Doug and I were in a double kayak, and we got we capsized into the water. And by the time our colleagues got back to try and pull us ashore, we had been in water that was 39 degrees Fahrenheit for quite a few minutes.
Thank God.
By the time I got ashore, I was unconscious, and it took them longer to get Doug ashore, and he didn't make it. He died of hypothermia. So you asked, Pete, well, what I learned from that. Well, the first thing I learned, I suppose, was to remind myself again what I had learned after Jonathan's death about just the essential importance of getting the most we can out of each day we have, because none of us know that day on our calendars that will be our last day, the day that all of us have on all of our calendars. And then that became maybe the most enduring thing that I've taken from Doug's death. And I knew this all along, but I've tried to live my life more consciously following it. And it's that knowledge that we all have, that we start dying the day we're born, that day we're born, that hour and minute that we're born, the clock starts ticking towards our deaths. And in some ways that makes life perhaps absurd, but yet, on the other hand, it underscores the utter importance of acknowledging that absurdity and responding to it with a commitment to live as fully as we can, as engaged as we can, as much as we can, not for ourselves, but for others. And to find in that commitment, in those engagements, as much joy as we can take from our lives. And that is, I hope, perhaps the biggest lesson that I've taken from my time in wildness and nature, that I hope to give to the readers of this book, so that my stories can perhaps inform their stories in some way that make their stories and their lives more fulfilling.
Well, it's working on me. I just wanted to ask you about your time at Patagonia, and a lot of people know about that company and its moral compass, if you will. But explain to us how you can create a product that people buy and love, and still be responsible in terms of consumption, in terms of climate, pollution, all of it. What responsibility does Patagonia see to the people who buy the product, the people who don't, and the planet in general?
Patagonia is one of the leading companies in the world, certainly not the only one, but among the leading companies in the world that does the best jobs possible in making its products with the least harm on the environment. But a company that also acknowledges that no matter how hard it strives towards that goal, the creation of its products still cause some harm. That was the origin of our commitment to run the now famous ad that we did on Black Friday in 2011 with a big oversight in the New York Times, full page with an oversized photo of one of our best-selling jackets and the headline above it, "Don't buy this jacket," which we ran on the launch of the feeding frenzy of consumerism each year that starts just after Thanksgiving. And we wanted to shock readers so that they would read the copy where we explained to them that no matter how hard we tried to make that jacket with no unnecessary harm to the planet and people, it still caused harm, still released 20 pounds of CO2 gases, and it still left behind 2/3 of its weight in waste. And that maybe what we all needed to think about was adjusting our consumption, that perhaps what we all needed to do was use less and not have 3 or 4 jackets in our closet when 1 or 2 would serve us just fine. Well, it inspired a lot of conversations. That was the goal of that ad.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it had worked or not. And a few weeks later, I was in Washington, D.C. at an annual event for the World Wildlife Fund at a gala where I was introduced to the new president of the World Bank. And I shook his hand and he turned to talk to the next person. And then he paused and he turned back to me. He said, "Did you just say you're from Patagonia?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Did you have anything to do with that ad, 'Don't buy this jacket'?" I said, "Yeah, I actually helped create the ad." And that article, he said, in your catalog, the one with the ad, the one called "The Elephant in the Room" about consumption. And I go, "Yeah, I wrote it." And he goes, "Well, listen, I made copies of that ad and I sent it to every vice president in the World Bank. And I told them, we got to start thinking about this, guys."
Wow.
So, it had it did its job. That's exactly why we ran that ad. But then it invites the question of, well, if you don't want people to buy your stuff, when in truth, we don't want them to not buy our stuff. We want them to buy less of our stuff. And when they do need a jacket, buy ours, because we're trying to make it better than anybody else with least harm to the planet and people. But still, if everybody takes us up on this, it's going to pull the underpinnings out from capitalism. Like capitalism is built on annual compounded growth. Yet the science of macroeconomics shows us that annual compounded growth indefinitely will inexorably lead us to the cliff. Like lemmings, we'll all go over.
Yes.
So what do we do about that? Well, nobody knows the answer to that question yet, but we wanted to get the conversation started, and we succeeded in that. But since that ad came out, there's been other developments that show that there are perhaps other solutions in front of us. And perhaps the most exciting is around the production of regeneratively grown food and fiber.
Right.
What if we made our clothes out of fibers that were grown regeneratively, that used farming protocols that increased soil health, that continued, that sequestered carbon, so that those protocols actually pull carbon out of the air and put it back in the ground? If you had a T-shirt made out of cotton grown that way, you could then perhaps understand that your shirt was causing more good than it was harm, doing more good than it was causing harm, that it had a handprint instead of a footprint. So that's got us excited at Patagonia, and we're going deep into regenerative food and fiber, and that's the reason the company has created a brand extension into food called Patagonia Provisions, to try and scale the production of regeneratively produced food. So that's kind of an exciting opportunity for us. And since I retired from the company a couple of years ago, I've been spending more of my time as chair of a group called One Earth. And that group is funding the science of measuring just how much conversion from fossil fuels to renewable energies we need to do, how much conversion of food production to regenerative protocols we need to do, and how much increase in protecting nature through protected areas we need to do that then become major carbon sinks to keep the planet to 1.5 degrees.
Right.
Now, we've just about completed that science. It's taken us 7 or 8 years, cost tens of millions of dollars that we've raised to do that. And it's showing a path forward for all of us using only the tools that are already in our boxes to solve climate change, to keep the planet to 1.5 degrees, even potentially to lower it below there, to even approach atmospheric carbon partial pressures that existed at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. We can do this. We have all the tools that right in front of us. We need to do it. And what we don't have is the commitment. And that's what this group is trying to promote, that we can get together. So, we had a presence at Glasgow. We got the ear of a lot of policymakers. Mm-hmm. We're starting a lot of new conversations. And maybe just like Patagonia's Don't Buy This Jacket ad, we'll get the conversation going and maybe it'll lead somewhere.
Well, I appreciate getting the conversation going with me. It's been really wonderful. Rick Ridgeway, Life Lived, Wild Adventures at the Edge of the Map is a book that it's a beautiful book. I mean, the pictures and everything about it is wonderful. And it's really had a great impact on me as your life and specifically this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
Pete, my pleasure.
Well, how about that, folks? Was that as moving of conversation to you as it was to me? I did it yesterday afternoon, and then I listened back and edited it for just ums and ands and stuff from both of us. And I want to listen to it again. His wisdom, his stories, and his life experience, I feel, are of great value to me and hopefully to you as well. I highly recommend this book. And he's not on Twitter, but he is you can find him on Instagram, and if you want to follow him there. Wow. Okay. So that was really great, and now it's time for something completely different, because as I said earlier, I got an email from a longtime listener, Andrew, who is actually Australian, lives down in Australia, and he said, you heard it earlier. So in my effort to try to talk to people whose opinions I don't share, whose life experience is very different from mine, who see things in many ways very differently, I reached back out to Ryan in Kansas, who's a longtime listener of the show and a pretty staunch conservative. And I didn't know how this conversation was going to go. We, like I said, talked back in August for the first time, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. He was actually out in his field on his combine harvesting sorghum here he tells us at the beginning of the interview. He's a farmer in Kansas. I won't tell you too many more details about him. Married, has 4 kids, and you can learn more if you go back and listen to our original conversation. If you're someone who disagrees with me a lot and you think it would be great to tape a conversation, reach out to me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. But for now, here is my conversation with Ryan in Kansas on the farm.
Hello.
Yo.
Hey, how you doing?
Are you on the combine?
I am on the combine.
All right, I'm recording.
Okay.
You ready to rock?
I'm ready to rock.
Awesome. What are you farming? Tell the folks. Tell the folks.
I am harvesting sorghum. So. And
okay, harvesting is the word, because that means the crop is ready.
Correct. Yes, we had the crops. Some parts of the crop have been ready for weeks and weeks now, but overall, the way you get sorghum harvested is you need a freeze. And we just got our big hard freeze last Friday. And so now that kills the plant off enough and dries it down enough to where we can then start cutting it and harvesting. So
sorghum is a genus of about 25 species of flowering plants. You told me earlier, I'm reading it off the internet, it's like corn.
Similar in what its feed value is used for. It does the same thing that feedlots and other companies use field corn for. It's just not corn. It's an ancient grain, as they say.
All right. But by the way, just so you know, you're not allowed to say big hard freeze on this program. It offends and arouses people. Sorry, man.
Fair enough.
You could just. So I wanted to talk to you about. I just wanted to catch up. I went back and listened to our first conversation, and the weirdest thing in the world was I put you on an episode with Bob Saget, and I got way more feedback on you, no-name farmer from Kansas, than Bob Saget.
Oh, well, that's probably not a good thing.
No, it was a good thing. It was a good thing. People, and yesterday I got an email from listeners like, you're talking to too many people you agree with, that you need more varying viewpoints and stuff. And I just thought, well, I'm going to get some, policy people on and other people to share those viewpoints. But I wanted to just kind of revisit and continue our conversation. And I thought we could talk about a number of things, including the things that you're an expert on, which is, farming and other stuff. But I wanted to just start by saying, are you scared about where we're at as a country in terms of the way we're like looking at each other and talking about each other and demonizing and creating enemies of each other? Do you feel that that's happening?
Yeah, I'm worried. I really am. I've talked to my father and, a lot of people that are older than me, and they all say the same thing when I bring this stuff up about what's going on. They say it's never been like this.
Not in our lifetimes, that seems for sure.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of people that have said the 70s were pretty close with the Vietnam War. I mean, that was bad, but they say the division is just as bad.
How old are you again, Ryan?
I'm worried. 35.
I think you probably mean the 60s and the 65 to 69 is really bad.
Sorry.
But it's all right.
Yeah.
But so you and your family and most of your friends and stuff, is it fair to say, like, are way more conservative than, say, I am? Or, you said the last time you're a Trump supporter. I mean, is that all fair to describe yourself that way?
Sure. When I say a Trump supporter, I loved what he said and I love the fight. We've never had a fighter in my party, but I would never say Trump was a conservative. I consider myself that. I've had the same view since I was 18 years old, and nothing's really changed.
Okay. So the point being, going back to the first question, which is, what are you scared of in terms of the divisiveness and the rhetoric and the kind of demonizing? Like, what are your concerns about what that means for you and your family, your community, your country, however you want to answer it?
Well, I'm like, for instance, you and me right now, we're talking and we'll have a cordial conversation. And when we first talked, I thought, maybe that it would get heated, but it was fun. It was a blast. And I was nervous. I'm starting to see people from differing views don't hardly get together anymore. Like, that's what people want. People want someone like you who's smart and on the left versus someone who is maybe smart and on the right, which wouldn't be me. But that's what people want. It's like on these news shows, for instance, I don't hardly see it anymore. I mean, when does MSNBC have a conservative person on, or Fox have a far left like you? Why aren't you ever on Fox News, arguing? And
I think Fox has more like liberal pundits than MSNBC does, as far as I can tell. But I think part of that is just because liberals are pretty terrified, and I would argue rightfully so, to platform certain views like anti-vax or election conspiracy stuff,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
That's a fine and fair question. Yeah, but see, because I want to try to, I know this might sound stupid to some people listening, maybe even you, but I really want to try to create more unity and talk to people that I vehemently disagree on, and tape those conversations to show people that, in this case, Ryan in Kansas is not a monster, and vice versa. So I'm going to start this project slowly and see where it goes, which is part of why, I wanted to reach out to you again. But just, what do you think it leads to? Like, what are your, have you thought much about, where we're at and where we're going and what it means more specifically?
Well,
I know I'm putting you on the spot.
No, it's okay. Some people, and I'm kind of one of these. What I'd like to see, and I think we'd all get along a lot better, is if we didn't have a federal government so big that when I vote, I'm not telling you what to do and vice versa. I don't see why what you believe in, universal health care, universal pre-K, all of these things that you're a supporter of, why can't you do it in your state? But don't force it upon me. And we're to the point now where we're cheerleading for the president, and I'm one of them. I'm just as guilty as everybody else when really I don't know that it really affects us in the long run, maybe, but we're big cheerleaders now. It's tribal. Like, I can't remember the guy that you had on recently that was talking about, the way we're got into our tribes. But what I fear is we're going to be so far down into our tribes, so ingrained, that there will be no more communication. There will be, this is a right-wing state, and it won't even necessarily be a state thing. It'll be between cities and, urban, or rural and urban. I mean, it's where maybe in 10, 15 years, you will think I'm a complete and utter nut, or a Nazi, or whatever the hell all these crazy words are thrown around to where you would never have me on or talk to me, or vice versa. Maybe I'll think you're just a communist or something, silly like that. I really think that's where we're headed. There is some truth. You are a nut and I am a communist.
But hold on. Let me go back to something you said, because I think let me tell you what my concern is, that you and I talking respectfully, cordially, maybe we even become friendly. And I think I could really grow to like you because I'm really interested in your work. And I've always said everybody has something to offer me because everybody's good at something. And you're a farmer, and you mentioned in our last interview something about oil. You have rigs, oil producer, and there was one other thing. Cattle. I'm super interested to talk to farmers. I think, whether they're great to listen to or not, I record them or not, I don't know. But the point is, I could ask you, and I do want to ask you a few questions before we wrap up today about your work. But my concern is that, you and I don't agree on reality. I believe a thing is happening and you say it's not, and it's not political. And we can, the three examples that are so obvious to me that there should be no disagreement on are COVID, vaccines, I guess, climate change, and the results of the 2020 election. Those three things, there aren't two sides to any of to the three, in my opinion. But if you think there are, that becomes very dangerous. I'd rather argue about all the ins and outs of anything, but we have to have a baseline agreement on reality of what is happening. And, right now we have so many people in this country that refuse to get vaccinated that it's prolonging the pandemic. And the things that they believe around it are batshit crazy. And we could talk about why, but that's dangerous in that almost 1 million people will have died, probably did die in this country of COVID that didn't need to,
because they weren't vaccinated, right?
Well, not only that, but because I would argue that Trump did so much damage just to, not prepare us, and then to talk about it like it wasn't a thing, and then to say that it was going to go away. He was so irresponsible and unconcerned because he doesn't care about anybody that did damage. And then he said, don't wear masks, and that did damage. And he just didn't follow any of the science on any of it. So, and then you've got, forget Trump, he's gone, so he's not in charge, but you've got governors and boards of education and stuff. And it's just bizarre to me because we all hate wearing masks. We hate it. Right. But I don't understand the opposition to them. And I certainly even less, listen, the masks are a lot less important than the vaccine. So if we just talked about that, and then moved on to other things. But if we don't agree on the election, on climate change, and the vaccine's effectiveness or whatever, then where does it leave us?
Okay. Well, you're not going to get any disagreement from me on any of those three things.
Good.
As a farmer and rancher, I have to believe in science. I see it every day of my life. I believe in evolution. I'm not one of those crazies. And yeah, Joe Biden won the election fair and square. Trump lost. He lost conservatives. That's what he lost. That's why he lost. So I'm not one of those.
If he had handled COVID even decently, he'd have won, in my opinion.
Probably, but he lost. It's not a big deal to me, honestly. My ancestors were blown up in 2 wars in the European theater. Having Joe Biden as president, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. So now we got that squared away. Climate change, I believe in it. I have to. It's science. I don't really personally see it because my family's been farming for 150 years. You would think that would affect something here. Maybe it's that slow. But what we do about it, that's probably where you and I would differ. And then the vaccines. I've been vaccinated for stuff humans aren't supposed to be vaccinated for because of accidents. I've been vaccinated for vaccines that are supposed to be for cattle. So I believe in all of them. I think here's one little problem on all of this. The crazies are blown up by the press to make it seem like we're all that way. And we're not. I've never met an anti-vax person. I've never met somebody that thinks that climate is a hoax. And I've never met anybody that says Joe Biden stole the election. And I live in the reddest of reddest areas in the country. It's not a thing.
You not meeting them. I mean, I believe you, obviously, but maybe you don't get out much.
Well, there is some of that.
Maybe you don't. Well, you have 4 kids and a farm, and I'm just. It's less about I haven't met and more about, and it could be also like you do meet someone it doesn't come up. Like why would that?
That's very true.
And they assume you agree with them. Maybe I don't know. But if I looked it up right now. Don't you think I would find polling about what Kansas people in your community, town believe? And it would be.
I don't know what it would be. I'm sure it would be pretty high as far as people thinking that the election was rigged or some bullshit. Yeah. That's why I don't believe it was rigged. And I think I truly believe Biden won fair and square because we have a decentralized election. States get to decide how elections turn out. It's very hard to hack any kind of an election in the United States because it's so decentralized. So no, I don't. I mean, Trump lost fair and square. He did it to himself.
And I'm also surprised to hear you say that you personally haven't noticed the effects of climate change in Kansas, because I would think that farmers would be the first people to notice that, especially because aren't you at least second generation farmer?
Oh, I'm third.
So, yeah, you would think like there would be a conversation around the soil, and just looking it up quickly, it says Kansas's climate is changing. The past century, most of the state is warmed by at least half a degree. The soil is becoming drier, rainstorms becoming more intense, floods becoming more severe. I mean, I don't know. That was a quick search, but you're saying, as a farmer, you raise crops, you have cattle, you don't think you've been affected by weather that was exacerbated by climate, much less soil changes or something.
No, not at all. No. Now, but there's factors in this too, Pete. For instance, the genetic profile of the crops that we plant, whether it's wheat or sorghum. There's no genetically modified crops with regards to wheat or sorghum. However, through selective breeding, there is more drought-resistant crops out there. But I have to look at my average temperatures. I have to look at my average rainfall, and I don't see it personally. Again, not saying it's not happening, because a lot of the data that we have going back 100 years where it was relatively accurate, some horrible, horrible droughts and horrible, horrible heat hit 100 years ago. I mean, specifically the dirty 30s, as everybody knows about. And with tillage practices now, I don't understand how somebody could say there's less moisture, because there's a lot of land in Kansas that hasn't been worked up and tilled, releasing CO2 and moisture in 35 years. Like the practices that we're doing are only making it better for the soil. So there's a lot of factors there. Maybe if we farmed the same way we did 100 years ago, there'd be a massive problem. But rainfall averages are staying the same.
Farming technology, seed chemical technology, has adapted to climate changes and in many ways, for sure. And which is why I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't look. This is where we'll disagree. I don't find it to be that big of an emergency, but I could be wrong. I'm open to anything.
So, all right, you covered it all: the vaccines, climate, and the election. And
yeah, the only disagreement, by the way, Pete, on vaccines that we're going to have, I'm sorry, I don't believe in I don't think the federal government should tell you what to put in your arm, even if it's public health. Why can't climate change be public health and force us to stop buying big V8 engines in our cars or whatever? I mean, I know that's hypothetical, but I see that headed. That climate change is public health. Why couldn't it be?
Well, I mean, I think that's a terrible comparison.
Is it too much of a stretch?
Yeah, because that's that's forcing. I mean, there are incentives to buy certain types of vehicles. In Europe, they don't have giant SUVs, right?
Right.
Because they can't, because they don't subsidize gas. You know about that? The gas, our gas at the pump, I'm sure you know more about it than I do, is subsidized. So it costs $3-4 a gallon, where I don't know what the conversion rate is, but it's like €8 a liter, right? It's like,
sure,
you can't afford. You can't afford to drive a big car because you can't afford to fill it up because they don't subsidize. So it's all incentivized by government. And I'm sure you have all kinds of incentives as a farmer, I would imagine.
Oh, yes, yes, tons. So like dyed diesel fuel, for instance. That's the big one.
What do you call it?
Dyed diesel fuel, or tax-free farm diesel is what they call it, or fuel oil. It's been a big deal with truckers and farmers, like just a friendly, jab in the side with truck drivers and farmers over the years, because truck drivers have to pay taxed diesel.
Right.
And our diesel fuel is dyed. It's dyed red, and that means farm use only, no tax. So we don't pay sales tax on.
Here's the thing that's the problem with the argument with the vaccine mandate thing is nobody cared until last year. Your kids had to get vaccinated to go to school. So did mine. No one did anything about it.
Right.
And now they care. Why?
I think if people are just worried because it's a new thing. That's what I hear. It's new and they don't want to do it. And I don't agree with them. I'm vaccinated, which did absolutely no good. I still got COVID. Maybe we'll get into that later. But they're scared for their kids. And it's stupid. They're vaccinated for smallpox. But why don't we ask people to see their smallpox papers before they come into a restaurant?
Because we don't have a smallpox pandemic.
Well, if we did, maybe then that would be a big issue. But I know that. But the COVID pandemic, yeah, it's bad. It sucks. But is it the federal government's job to do that? I just don't think so.
Let me throw a curveball ideological question to you, which I think pertains to this. And obviously I'm generalizing, but we're doing a lot of that and it's helpful in a way. I often feel like conservative-minded people only care about the people that they know. And they don't care as much about complete strangers. And the opposite is true of liberals. And more specifically, that's why it's so easy to say I'm not racist against black people, Hispanic people, Asian people, because I know and like several. And that's not the point. The point is you're always going to know and like the people that you know and like. And you're probably not going to care that much about their ethnicity if you know and like them. And that's the whole thing about the vaccine mandate. It's about taking care of other people, not yourself. And I tend to think that, unfortunately, this kind of individualist philosophy and strain is so pervasive in conservative-minded Americans that they just don't care about other people, which is why they hate government so much, because government is there not to help you and your friend, but it's there to help everybody.
Well, I actually do agree with you. And then it should be up to that state, which that state has plenty of power to do so, to force you to get a vaccine, not the federal government or your local municipality or wherever.
Yeah, but OK, so then if your school or your state had a mandate for vaccines to go to this building, to go to this theater, to send your kids to school, then you would be OK with it because the state decided it, not the federal government.
Yes, I wouldn't be happy about it, but as far as the state, like, for instance, my governor, she's very progressive liberal, Laura Kelly, and she's not for it, which has surprised the hell out of me. But yes, I completely agree. Yeah, if the state mandates it, if New York wants to do it, you guys live in a completely different type of situation where a lot of people are on top of each other, especially in the city. That's their prerogative, and that's what they have.
Yeah, but the difference, I understand what you're saying, but the difference is the same reason why the federal government has to decide. Many have all kinds of different laws because, the virus doesn't stop at the border of Kansas.
Right.
And so if we don't have a mandate for everybody, then the pandemic never ends. It just keeps going because you guys won't get vaccinated. We will. And the mandates obviously work. Overwhelmingly, you can not like them, but overwhelmingly, people decide to get the vaccine and keep their job.
Right. Yeah. Well, I didn't get vaccinated because I was told to. I didn't have to. I believe in them. So I just want to make that clear. But yeah, viruses cross state lines. I understand that. It's the same thing with cattle. I don't have to by law do anything to my cattle, but I'm going to lose a fortune if I don't and something happens outbreak wise. It's up to those people in that state. And that's just my opinion. I don't think it's up to Trump to tell Pete Dominick what to do or anybody else or public health, whoever's in charge of public health in the federal government. It's just a core belief I have. That's too much power. And maybe more people died because of it, but why didn't those people get vaccinated? I thought the vaccine was supposed to protect the person getting the vaccine. My growing up, that's all I ever thought. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I thought.
Well, it does protect the people getting the vaccine, but it does do that. But
what's the problem with people not getting vaccinated if they don't want to? They're the ones that are going to get killed or get
Well, I'll give you. There's a billion answers to that. But the problem with people not getting vaccinated, the one that concerns me the most, is not necessarily that they're giving it to some innocent person who doesn't know they're next to somebody, right? Or the problem, and it's not. You can argue that rather vaccinated people can also spread the virus. I don't think nearly as badly, but regardless, I don't know exactly the answer to that. Here's the problem. If you don't get vaccinated, you're going to get really much sicker and go to the hospital. And I'm sure you haven't been paying attention to this, but I do for a living. Doctors and healthcare workers in hospitals around the country are quitting. And they're being tortured by these people who refuse to get vaccinated. So, again, if you ask them, they say, listen, we did our role. We showed up on the front lines and cared for millions of people, thousands of people at our hospital that came in sick. And we never would blame any of them. It was a virus. Once the vaccine was available to everybody and people didn't take it and they kept coming in and putting us and our families at danger, it was the only kind of thing that doctors ever really, that I've heard of, said, I don't want to help these people. It's their fault. They're putting me and everybody else in danger, and they could fix this. And it's, by the way, for conservatives, it's the height of irresponsibility for people who talk about personal responsibility. You're making these doctors and nurses take care of you, put themselves in danger for well over a year of their lives. It's horrific what unvaccinated people are doing to hospital workers.
Well, then I assume, and I agree with you, but I assume that those hospital workers were forced to get vaccinated via the state or their employer. And it's not an easy answer, and it's not black and white, Pete. I don't like the fact that all this is going on, and I think it's stupid people aren't getting vaccinated.
Yeah, but it's not that it's necessarily putting them in danger. You're saying I assume that they're forced to get vaccinated at this point, yeah. But it's not that they're putting them in danger necessarily. And they are, as you know, you and your whole family, you told me earlier, got sick. My wife got sick. You can still get sick even with the vaccine. Right. And then you're really sick potentially, and you're out of work. And more importantly, people who have gotten in accidents, or what if my kid or my dad got in an accident and there was no ICU bed because you wouldn't get vaccinated. It isn't just on you. It's on the whole community because you won't get vaccinated. And all these arguments that conservatives make about personal responsibility are such bullshit if you don't do this one. You're affecting the whole community. You're making the argument that you're only affecting yourself, but now that's not true.
Well, yeah, I mean, I really can't argue with you other than it's not up to whoever in the federal government. We shouldn't be even having this conversation. New York should have forced it upon your people in New York a long time ago.
Yeah, but it doesn't help if Pennsylvania doesn't. It doesn't make as much of a difference. We have people from Pennsylvania come in. I mean, that's all right. I don't want to belabor that point. You're not convinced. Let me ask you about, what you think. We've talked before the first time about race a little bit, and then I'll get off the touchy subjects. I want to ask you about farming. But are you concerned at all about this the CRT in schools issue?
Well, it's not critical race theory. That's what we were told. It's not that. It's not an issue because critical race theory isn't being taught in these schools, Virginia schools, or in any of these schools.
Well, I mean, it's an issue in my in my school. Parents.
I thought you said that was a non-issue though, because critical race theory is not being taught.
No, right. It isn't being taught.
Yeah,
but parents think that it is.
Do you think all of those parents are just wrong? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, you do.
For sure.
See,
because it's easy to find out. All you have to do, if you're really a concerned parent and you're really an involved parent, you'd be involved with your kids. You'd be going to parent-teacher conference. But, a lot of us don't. I do. But a lot of people don't. They're busy.
Yeah.
Whatever. And most people trust the teacher. And it's like, it's so offensive to me. It's like, and in a moment, I'm going to ask you some specific questions about what you do on the farm. And you're going to sound brilliant, and imagine me arguing with you about it. Imagine me telling you how to raise your cattle or your crops. The height of it would be ridiculously arrogant. And so you, a cattle farmer, telling a teacher how to teach history would be equally as arrogant and offensive to a teacher who has a master's degree. And I'm not sure they're required in Kansas, but they are in New York. And so if you want to know if they're teaching it in school, this is the burden of proof is on all of these terrified parents. And what I've been saying in my community, where we have plenty of them, is show me the class, show me the teacher, show me the lesson. Just show me. And none of them can answer that. Nobody's ever answered it. There is, because it's not a thing. And now they're conflating it with diversity and inclusion. And so, I want your opinion on how much concern you have over what is being taught in your kid's school or any kid's school when it comes to history or race or anything else.
All they want is the accurate history and the truth. I'm not concerned about what's going on in my kid's school. I want the accurate history and the truth, that white people did horrible things to black people at the beginning of this country. But that doesn't mean that what our founders did totally was bad, right? Obviously, that's a horrible. I just want the truth. Whatever the truth is, that's all I want.
So one of the arguments you hear a lot is that you're teaching my child to be ashamed of herself because she's white, or to feel less than.
I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that.
Because she's white. Do you, is that something that resonates at all with you?
If it's true, that's not a very good thing, I don't think, but I don't know if that's true. There's a couple of these talking points that are going around in right-wing media about one girl comes home and says, am I evil because I'm white? But do we actually know if that's true, or is that just made up bullshit?
No, but I'm sure there are things that are being said and taught, and that we could cherry pick anything. I mean, listen, show me a conservative state, and I'll tell you, and I'll go into that school and I'll hear a teacher say something that I think I'd probably be appalled by. I'm sure we could all do that to each other. But when you say that, kind of, and I've heard that too, I have a snappy answer for that, Ryan, which is, if your daughter comes home and says something like that, then you have an opportunity to be a good parent.
Of course.
If your kids, this is what I've been saying at these board meetings and everywhere else I can, if your child is feels guilty or is ashamed of herself or himself because he's white, then it's bad parenting. It's not bad. Yeah. It's not the school.
I completely agree with you there. I mean, the school with a shitty teacher or somebody with an agenda may plant a seed, but it's up to the parents to make sure those bad seeds are chopped down. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I completely
think most
agree.
teachers are good. I think there's bad teachers too, but I think, most teachers generally stick to a curriculum. So let's talk about the curriculum and learn about it. But again, what they're doing is they're picking out these words, and critical race theory was like mentioned at a diversity and inclusion meeting. It was mentioned. And then they take the mention and say, see, it's being taught. And every teacher in the school is like, I've never even heard of what this is. So it's not being taught. I've never even heard of it until now. Yeah. So, yeah, okay. So you're not really too concerned about that. And you generally trust the teachers and the educators. Are you concerned that parents are threatening the Board of Education, like with violence?
Let me see it. Let me just see it. I am concerned if that's happening. I know that the Department of Justice was sent a letter to somebody or got a letter from a teachers union or something.
No, so I'll tell you what happened, then you can react to it real quick. Okay. So there's like an organization that is the umbrella organization for all the boards of education in the country. And you can be a member or not, but it represents maybe, 15,000 schools or something, boards, right? And as there is for everything, for, people who do the specific kind of farming, there's a group for you too. And they represent. And so they, on behalf of the boards, they saw what was happening across the country, and they wrote a letter to the Department of Justice and said, this is really getting dangerous. We're very concerned. And I think they used some kind of words like domestic terrorism. The Department of Justice gets the letter and then puts out a memo basically saying, we heard you and we will work. The FBI basically will work with local law enforcement wherever we hear, these kinds of reports being made. And when you say, there's tons of videos out there of people threatening, I know where you live, and the voicemail messages, and you have Board of Education members who are volunteers quitting because they're like, I'm not dealing with this shit.
Right. Yeah. If that's happening, that's a massive problem because it's a public forum. You should be able to say, I think a lot of people were thinking the media blew something up again. Let me tell you what a lot of this is, by the way. It's just distrust of the press. Anything that comes from CNN, you got a lot of people on the right that just go, fuck them. It's not true. It's not true. I don't care. It's not true. But if somebody said, like you just said, I know where you live, to me, yeah, that's pretty close. That's borderline right there. That's not good. But then I heard something recently about if you wanted to speak at a meeting, for a Board of Education meeting, you had to state your first and last name and your address and where you live. Now, that I don't think is correct either. They say, well, it's to make sure you live in the district or something like that. But it's like, there's so much hostility right now between parents, whether right or wrong. And this isn't happening out here. So I just get what I get from the news. And it's either slanted one way or the other. That's not Pete Dominic's show. No, I'm just kidding. I just don't know.
I think you make a really good point. I heard one of my favorite kind of media critics, journalism professors, Jay Rosen, talking about this on a podcast that, if CNN reported it, there's no need to even look at it or whatever your news outlet. And I think that's super dangerous. By the way, does it surprise you that most people on the left do not think CNN is very liberal?
Yeah, probably not liberal enough would be my guess.
Well, I think, the criticism, granted, like Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo are, but, those hours at night. But no, the criticism is usually that they give Republicans way too much credence and respect on their programs and stuff. Like Chuck Todd is hated by liberals.
That's
MSNBC, Chuck Todd.
They think we are evil. Now, as much as I don't want to believe, like on election night, all I watched was CNN with the Virginia stuff, CNN and MSNBC or whatever. Like normal breaking, steady coverage, that seems just like anything you'd see on Fox News. But when it comes to the opinion stuff, like how many progressives do you think would go, man, Tucker had a great segment last night? Like nobody. That's how divided it is. There's no crossover anymore.
Well, Fox News is an entity of its own. I feel like we can't even put them in the category of anybody else.
Okay, well, I will. And they do better than CNN or MSNBC.
Do better better. Do better.
I'm just saying ratings.
Yeah, but we should never, don't you agree? We should never be measuring our journalists by how many people watch them because more people are going to watch the more for all kinds of insidious reasons.
Well, sure, of course. Yeah, I don't watch anything on Fox, but I know this is going to make a lot of people mad. But I love, or as we call it, Tucker porn. I absolutely love Tucker porn. It's great.
Yeah,
and I know you think he's a white supremacist. It's like, holy shit,
he's a living and breathing.
Is there anybody that's not?
Well, sure, I'm not.
Who? Everybody.
No. I mean, it's pretty clear. Like I think we got into this last time, but I feel like maybe we didn't. But I feel like if all the black people say I'm a white supremacist, I'm not. Like, it'd be weird for me to argue with them.
Okay.
Like, I'm going to listen to all the women who are going to say that guy in the office is a sexist. Okay. Like, who am I to say he's not? Yeah. But Tucker Carlson is an outspoken white supremacist. He admits it.
I guess I missed that one.
Well, yeah, I think you do miss it because you're not spending enough time listening to the people who study such things. And I mean, the replacement theory stuff, that's like really, really classic. They're bringing.
I remember this now. I remember. Yes. Yeah, I could kind of see how people would be touchy on that. Touchy on the replacement theory, that it's not a thing. Look, all I see is 80%, and we talked about this last time, 80% of foreign-born Americans are registered with the Democratic Party. Of course, if it was the opposite, Republicans would be fighting hand over fist to keep our borders wide open.
No. I disagree. Here's the thing.
Okay.
Let's say you and I agreed on the border. Let's say we didn't have there was no racism, there was no concern about that. The thing would be, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican. There's new people here from this country. How do I convince them to vote for me? The reason why foreign-born people don't vote for Republicans is because Republicans fucking hate them. That's why.
That's not true.
Sure
Maybe
it is.
You think that, but that's a huge generalization, and I don't. I mean, that's not true. Every Republican I know, his family came from somewhere. But I don't hate. I mean, we're like, for instance, where I live, we have a lot of legal and illegal. Not anywhere else, just from Mexico. Mexican. They're big. They're great. They have big families like I have. They seem to be incredibly family oriented. The problem is it's basically segregated out here. There's no living amongst each other. It's here's where the Hispanic people, or not even that, Mexican people that come here live, and here's where, the rest of them are the white people. Like that, that's not true. Republicans, especially business Republicans, absolutely love it because they like the cheap labor and the backbreaking hard work that they do.
Well,
but I mean, I don't hate them. I mean, that's not necessarily true. I'm sure some do, sure.
But they vote for Democrats because the policies that Democrats support are way more helpful to their families. And if Republicans supported those policies, like the question should be, why can't Republicans win over Somalian refugees? One of the arguments that Tucker Carlson made was so inhuman, so disgusting against the Afghanistan refugees coming into America. Do you not think that that's fucking grotesque?
Yeah. What did he say?
Exactly what he said, but he was against it. They're all against it.
Against all these. Yeah. That's pretty shitty. I think if they helped out, then, especially in this war that, in Afghanistan that we did.
But even if they didn't, America and Christian organizations especially have always resettled refugees from countries where they were in danger, where they were escaping.
Oh, yeah.
Even if they did nothing for America, that was what America was.
Yeah.
But now it's not. Republicans are anti-immigration. They don't want immigrants in the country. They pass policies that makes it impossible for this generation of immigrants to come into America.
I thought a lot of it was reversed with the Biden administration. I don't know what policies other than the stay in Mexico policy, which was kind of a big deal.
You need, the problem with immigration is you need a massive, comprehensive number of laws to be passed to make it, to streamline immigration. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it'll never be perfect, but in 2013, They had that comprehensive immigration deal. They had enough Republican senators, believe it or not, to vote for it. And the Republican House refused to take it up for a vote. They never voted on it because they thought it would pass.
I remember that.
And it had more money for security than Trump ever even asked for. That bill that they turned down. And then they sit here and say the border is broken. Yeah, the border is broken, mostly because in 2013, you didn't vote in the House for comprehensive immigration reform that would have had billions in security and all kinds of job and employment stuff and everything else. But it had amnesty in it for people who had been here. They had the DREAM Act. I mean, you say they're not racist, and maybe that word is loaded. But if a person is brought here when they're 5 by their parent who came in illegally, and that person goes to schools here and speaks perfect English and is brilliant, valedictorian, joins the military, Republicans won't let them have a citizenship. Won't let them. They were babies. Right. They didn't choose to come here. Their parents brought them here, and they've been amazing citizens. They will not allow them to have peace of mind. Peace of mind, Ryan, knowing that they're not going to get kicked out of the country they grew up in and love.
Yeah, and I think as far as the politicians that my state has sent to Washington over this issue, they say they want the Dreamers to stay, that we need to get them citizenship, but everybody doesn't care. They say, lock the border down or we're not doing anything. That's just, I'm not agreeing with it, but that's the sentiment.
Yeah, but it's beyond stupid. It's not a dumb policy, lock the border. But Chris Kobach is from Kansas, and he's the worst on immigration.
Yeah, he's hardline, that's for sure.
Okay. So let me ask you about farming stuff, and then we'll revisit all the rest of this stuff at some point when we and maybe we'll do something where we can take calls or you can talk to people. Tell me about cattle. What do you like? I don't even know what question to ask. I do know a little bit. I grew up, at rural upstate New York around a lot of farms and stuff. But like, how many head of cattle do you have? What kind of cattle? What do you have them for? What do they do? Oh my God! I just asked you. This is how stupid I am. I just go, what do they do? Fucking idiot.
No, I have black Angus, black Baldies, which are crossed.
Why do they got to be black Angus? I'm joking.
It's just a thing. No, I know.
So black Angus and black what?
Black Baldy, which means you have a black Angus cow bred by a Hereford bull, crossbreed bred by Hereford bull, gives you either black-bodied white-faced calf or a red-bodied white-faced calf. So we have black Angus, which are all black. And we have black Baldies, which have a white face, just like a Hereford, and a white belly, but have a black hide and back. And then we have Herefords, which are red body, white belly, white face. And when I texted you earlier, you had said talk about sorting because I said I'd be in the middle of sorting cattle. Well, that's what I was doing. We had a group of cows that had calved in February. They had their baby last February. And then we vaccinate them. We band them. We give them, all the drugs and any of the stuff that they need prior to going to pasture. Then we turn those cows with their babies out to pasture in the spring. And then as of this morning or about noon, when I was going back and forth with you, we were taking those babies away from their mamas at 800 pounds.
You monster. You're worse than Trump separating families.
I knew I was going to get that.
Do you think they know?
Oh, yeah.
They're sad.
They're sad. They're going to bawl for probably 3 days.
Are you serious?
Bawl. Oh, yeah. They'll just stand there and bawl and bawl and bawl.
Does it affect you at all?
Not anymore. It did when I was a kid. Now it's just part of nature. It actually helps the cow. Because in nature, a cow would be having an 800, 900-pound calf nursing on her while she's giving birth, essentially, to a new baby. And then the cow has to naturally wean that calf off, which can be very difficult for the cow.
I mean, you could keep telling yourself that, but isn't there nothing natural about your cattle? Like, without you doing everything to basically... I mean, do those species exist in the wild that you have?
No. So, no, because what we've done is we've taken the easiest handling cattle and we've selectively bred them.
So I'm not even judging it. I don't even know what I'm talking about. But how many do you have, and how do you make money?
Okay, so I have personally 80 head. That's all. My dad, who I work for, my father, who I worked for my whole life, he has 500 head. And that's what we do. We pull the calves off in the fall. We're going to be vaccinating tomorrow, actually, these 800-pound calves. We'll wean them, which means we essentially walk them through the weaning process, where they're not only not with mommy anymore, they're also not nursing anymore. So they're not nursing milk anymore. And we feed them a specialty feed that helps with the stress of that. And that stress is about a 1 week long period. And after 1 week, the calves could get sick. I mean, when I say could, like maybe 1 out of 100 will maybe catch a fever or catch a respiratory illness, and then you would treat them for that accordingly. It's usually not very many, but in this process, a calf can lose up to 20% of its body mass because they want to nurse. They don't want to just eat grass. And so you walk them through that by giving them specialty feeds as you get through that process. And then when you go to sell them at market, for instance, maybe next month or 2 months or 3 months from now, depending on what you do with them, they'll bring a higher price because they're already weaned. And the stuff that I had to do means the feedlot or, the cattle buyers that are getting them don't have to do that.
But they're all beef. They're all. Why do people sell them, or why do you? What do you sell them for? Sorry.
Yeah, when I'm done with them and they go to market, they will go to a feedlot where they'll be finished at about 1,400 pounds. And finished means just taking them up to kill weight.
And then can you look at any head of your cattle and say most of them are going to end up on a plate, on a is it human consumption beef? Sorry for the ignorant question. Is it like McDonald's?
Yeah, it's everything. It's beef. They go to the feedlot, they get finished, they're killed, then their carcasses are hung, and then after their carcasses are hung, they're inspected, and they're inspected for quality, for grade, like you see sometimes grade, USDA choice prime, this, that, and the other, depending on how healthy the carcass is with regards to marbling and fat content. And then, so essentially every calf that I sell at market will be finished and slaughtered.
So don't I have you now, though, on a technicality, and I swear I didn't plan this, but you're making me think, that the federal regulations for how you raise and sell, and I guess at the end point, most importantly, it's inspected, it's a federal law. It's a national law because anybody in the country, and they probably get sold to internationally, maybe either, could eat it. And so there has to be one standard for how all farmers raise their cattle because anybody could eat them. It's not like just people in Kansas, I would imagine, are eating that.
Right. No, as far as how you raise cattle, it has nothing to do with the federal government. It's personal preference, it's personal, your personal ranch.
Yeah, but there are regulations.
Of course, after the kill, that's where the regulations come in. And honestly, there's a great book. I haven't got through all of it, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent here, but there's a great book called The Meat Racket. And a lot of that talks about how, and I'm not blaming government, I'm not blaming regulations. I'm just saying this is the way it is, that there's only four companies that control an overwhelming majority of the meat processing in this country because they can afford. I mean, there's very little. They're there, but there are very few ma and pa slaughtering facilities. It's so expensive. Number one, the regulations are crazy, and they should be there, or at least within the state, to cross state lines or anything like that. I'm not attacking one way or the other. I'm just telling you kind of how it is. It's Tyson, Cargill, and I can't remember the other two off the top of my head, but they own it all.
So, okay. So, we could talk to you forever about cattle, but real quick, the other revenue streams you have on your farm are crops, and is the oil also there?
Yeah, the oil was my in-laws' dream when they retired, that they wanted to do that, and took him, lost most of his money he had, and took him 5 years, but he's got one oil well that he drilled before he died that I'm the owner of now, or my wife and I are the owner of now. And so I learned a lot that time, but it's not like I'm a big oil company. It's just
you have one well on your property. And it produces.
Yeah, and it's not even on my property. I leased property from somebody else, and then I seismographed it.
And does that require you? I don't know what that meant, but does that mean you just get basically somebody else operates it all? Like you just get paid because it's on your property at this point?
So I operate it. So what happens is I lease the ground, I gather investors, I sell off shares, and then once I have the money to do it, we drill. And luckily we got an oil well on this one, drilled plenty of dry holes, and then you set pipe, you set tank batteries, and you put a pumping unit on it, and you pump away. And that's essentially it. And then you sell, depending on how much oil you sell, if you sell a tank a month, which is 160 barrels, then you get a check every month as your return. So, but it hasn't been very good. The last year, when COVID hit and oil was $10 or whatever for a while there, it was some pretty rough times.
Yeah. I remember that. And then finally, what crops? We talked at the beginning about sorghum. What else?
Sorghum and wheat is all we do out
every
here.
Year?
On a rotation. There's usually wheat will plant maybe two years in a row, but you have to rotate crops or ground will not fail, but ground won't produce. You'll have plenty of weeds that, otherwise wouldn't have been there come in. You have to rotate. So we just rotate between two crops. That's it.
And you do that because it's the most profitable.
Yeah, some people do corn, some people do soybeans out here, but with our rainfall, we average 22 inches of rainfall here a year. The only two, right now I'm cutting milo that's 105 bushel to the acre. Soybeans, even on a great year for out here, it's too hot too, by the way. Yeah, maybe 15 or 20 bushels. So it's not profitable for us. Some people do it. I've never really understood how they can pull it off, but some do.
And you said you work for your dad?
Yes.
How did you learn? Did you go to school for it? Or did you just learn by doing it growing up?
I learned by doing it because I've helped my dad since I was, 13 years old. I was on a tractor and implement before I ever had a driver's license. And then the only time I haven't really done this for my father is when I went to college. And so I went to college, did what I had to do. The only thing I really wanted to do with my life was become a pilot. I haven't done that yet, but ever since I got out of school, I was working for my dad.
Oh, wow. Why didn't you ever pursue the pilot thing?
I am slowly, but with my hours and my line of work, it's hard.
So that was the final thing I was going to ask you about. How many people work on your farm? How do you take a day off?
Days off, usually Sunday afternoon, except for when I'm in harvest, like right now. When I'm in harvest, it's every day until we're done. So we should be done this week. Hopefully, I only have 640 acres left. So I should be done, and then I'll have Sundays off throughout the winter, and I have Sundays off throughout the summer. There's no overtime. There's none of these federal laws apply to farmers. And as far as help, we have one other guy that's hired full-time. So there's me and another guy that work full-time for my father, and then we contract hire out in the summertime during harvest season, where we need truck drivers, we need grain cart drivers, stuff like that. It's usually older guys that are somewhat retired that know how to drive a semi, and then that's what we do.
I have a million more questions. I'll let you go, get back at it. But I have one last question, which is, after our second conversation now, I have grown to like and admire you for several different reasons, but mainly and mostly because you're curious, you seem reasonable on the things that we disagree on, but more than anything else, like, your work is fascinating to me, and talking to you about that I'm interested in that, and there's our common ground. And in our previous conversation, you talked about your wife. We didn't get to you guys getting COVID, but we talked about your wife and your kids and everything. You seem like a great dad. You seem very much, in love with your wife and all that. And so I always get stuck here. I get stuck here because I go, well, I like this guy. How could he possibly be okay with Donald Trump and the way that he treats and talks about people? How? He is the worst person in the world, really, like, without exaggeration, because he has every bad quality a person can have. He's just a terrible, dishonest, sick individual. And I don't know how someone like you, who works his ass off, who pays taxes, who seems like a decent guy by pretty much every account, could look at that guy, or even Tucker Carlson, by the way, and not just be absolutely disgusted by them. That bewilders me.
Well, I will be the first to say I was disgusted by a lot of stuff Trump did and the way he talked. But I also admired him as a fighter.
I think you're breaking up or something. Are you there, Ryan?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you hear me?
Yeah, last thing I heard you say is fighter.
He's a fighter. He was a fighter for the few things that him and I agreed on stuff. He was a fighter. That's what I love. That's all.
What about the insurrection?
Yeah. Okay. It was embarrassment. It was absolutely embarrassment to my voting bloc or the people that love Trump. It was an embarrassment to my party. But I refuse to call it an insurrection. And an insurrection without weapons, how are they going to take anything over without weapons? That's silly. They were a bunch of hooligans.
It was a coup d'etat.
Things. It was hooligans that did foolish things. They were an embarrassment. They weren't trying to take anything over. They were being stupid people.
But they were trying to take it over. They were trying They were trying to prevent the election from being certified. They were trying to.
Yeah, they were retarded. But they were stupid. But to take over the United and an insurrection with no weapons, how do you do that?
Well, you do that
they're just stupid people.
Well, what do you think of Donald Trump doing nothing about it, sitting there in the White House and doing nothing and wanting it to happen and allowing his own vice president to be put in that kind of danger?
It was like I said, it was one of the most embarrassing things.
Yeah, but does
I've
that not make him?
Witness.
I know, but doesn't that make him a grotesque person, Donald Trump? He rooted for it. You're disgusted by so much of it, and yet somehow you're not disgusted by him.
Oh, I'm disgusted by things he did. Yeah, I'm disgusted by that.
Him?
I don't disgust him as a man. I think he was not as a whole. No, you can't judge a book by its cover. As far as I'm concerned, he's a womanizer. He was but he also fought, and he didn't stop fighting. My party's never had that before.
I disagree with you.
Who? George Bush got steamrolled, and rightfully so. By the way, before you let me go, that is something that I wanted to thank you on, because I used to argue with you a long time ago about Iraq war and Afghanistan and why I thought Bush was such a great president. What a piece of shit I was. And once I had kids, I realized, oh my God, that could have been one of my children killed in Afghanistan or Iraq, and for what? So thank you, by the way.
Oh,
but
well.
He always got steamrolled by the press. He was a shitty president. Trump never got any positive press except for right-wing crazy outlets.
He shouldn't have gotten any positive press. He did nothing for anybody.
I disagree.
What did he do?
Well, the trade, I know there wasn't a lot changed with these trade negotiations, and I also know that COVID had a big deal to do with this, with these higher grain prices. But higher grain prices finally started to tick up once China started buying more of our commodities. I'm thankful for that, if nothing else. I wanted to see Obamacare gone just like the rest of them. It's never going to be gone.
You know what Obamacare saved?
Job. It's not a federal government's job to take care of people and hold their hand. Why is it that I, who am a stupid nobody out here, have been able to have my own insurance privately since I was 18? And now all I hear is universal.
Well,
universal.
Dude,
you guys got what you wanted. You guys got what you wanted. That's as close as you guys could get. Now that's not good enough. It's got to be universal.
Well, of course it does. Because we could argue about healthcare forever, but I don't know how to say this without making it sound like a dick. Like, your dad is the reason why you have pretty much everything. You're working for your dad, and I don't want to take anything away from you because you work as hard as probably any American, period. It's not like you're taking anything from somebody. You're actually creating food. I mean, it's a pretty noble work you do, but that's why you have health insurance, because your dad's farm.
No, I have health insurance because I've paid for it since I was 18
Yeah, but you can only pay for it because of your dad's farm.
And I'd pay for it if I worked somewhere else. I've always had private health insurance.
But you shouldn't have to. But put it this way. You're talking to me. Without Obamacare, I'd be fucked. My whole family would be, because I lost my corporate job. And why I don't understand why conservative Republicans don't support universal health care, because it creates entrepreneurial spirit. You can go do whatever you want and not have to worry about employer-based healthcare. It's crazy. You guys, the right gets so worked up and fired up about policies that they don't even realize they would benefit from. And finally, Medicare is not controversial on the right. People love it. They don't want to nobody wants to get rid of Medicare. Why? It's universal health care for people over 65. Why should the most expensive population in the country get health care?
Well, I think that was hashed out when Medicare was passed,
yeah, because the insurance companies didn't want to pay for the people that were most likely going to get care.
Which made it cheaper for the rest of the population. And
no, it would make it cheaper for the rest of the population if we were all in the pool.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, of course.
We all should have Medicare, like every other country in the world. Not every other country, but every rich country.
But I think you should be able to pick and choose. Not every, yeah. And most of those rich countries, by the way, don't they have both? Sorry, don't they have voting? I'm sorry. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm losing.
I'm sorry. Anyway, yeah. I agree with you on the cost thing. I think universal would be cheaper. I think it's we're at 20% or 17%. Most of those other countries are 10%, something like that, 9% as far as GDP, if I remember right. But again, I don't think that's the place of the federal government to be doing that.
All right. Well, I'm happy to, you can always have an ideological opposition to it, but an economic one, I don't think you can at this point. So, but listen, dude, I gotta let you go. I love talking to you, and we'll do it again soon. I appreciate you taking time out of harvesting sorghum to waste time jabbering with me, man. And I'll post it for tomorrow if you're cool with it.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciated it. And that was fun, and you're a good dude.
All right, man. We'll talk again soon, Ryan. Thank you very much. Send me more pictures. I'll include them.
All right,
buddy. I appreciate it. Bye. Well, there you go. I really want to know what you think of that. I really want to know what you think of my conversation with Ryan, which I'm sure will be ongoing, and I'd like to have ongoing conversations with others as well. So who's up next? Let me know. standupwithpete@gmail.com. Always looking to have great conversations that help us understand each other and not dehumanize each other. I know it's so easy to do, but I just don't, I can't live in that world. I don't want to live in that world. Okay, well, that's all I got for you today. What a show. Put a lot of work into this one. Thanks so much for those of you who are recognizing that. It means a lot to me. If you haven't signed up for a paid subscription, please consider it. Go to standupwithpete.com. You can sign up there, listen to the podcast there as well, and find out more about me and my work. And sign up to subscribe at the YouTube channel. I am supposed to be posting on that every day, but it's more like once a week. But posting interviews up there, youtube.com/standup. And that's it. I will see you at the Hangout tonight. Or not. I have to go to a Board of Education meeting. I forgot to mention that at the top. I might have to do this Friday. I look for the email either way. I hope to see you whenever we do hang out next. Probably it might have to be Friday though. I really am worried about this Board of Education meeting tonight. They're one Thursday a month, so been a real cock block on our Hangouts. So I'll email you at some point and let you know. Hope to see you either way. Thank you very much. John Carroll, sing us away, would you?
I think you're driving wheels been leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. You got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up. Stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. Sees the face where stand for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on.